Okay, where we left off with session 1, and you heard me say at the beginning of that clip, I'm going to do most of the talking. You say that first session 1, I'm going to do most of the talking because this is the education session. After this, it's going to be much more equal, and you're going to take over more and more as you become the therapist, etc. So we just talked about the just world, and we talked about how you explain assimilation and accommodation without using jargon. You want to talk about emotions, the natural emotions and the manufactured ones. One of the examples that we sometimes do, and I talked about that this morning, so I'm not going to get into that too much, but sometimes we'll use the analogy of a fire. And we'll say emotions are kind of like having a fire. They have a heat to them, they have energy to them, you want to back away from them. But if you just sit there and watch the fire, what happens? And the person says, well, it burns down. Yeah, eventually it just turns into ash, doesn't it? And the heat gets less, and then eventually it gets cold, and it's just not going to have the same effect. That's what a natural emotion's like. On the other hand, here's an example of a manufactured emotion. My friend died and it hurts. And we'll say, that's like throwing thought logs on the fire. And you keep saying, I'm a horrible person, or this shouldn't have happened, or blah, blah, blah. You can keep your PTSD going forever. In fact, you can make it such a big bonfire that you can't even find those old natural emotions because they're kind of buried under that huge bonfire you've built. So what it says up here, if you can't read it back there, it says, the person says, my friend died and it hurts. I shouldn't have to experience this loss. Good people shouldn't die young. I must get revenge. Fathers with young children shouldn't die. I hear soldiers say that. It's like, but you haven't had a chance to have children. Maybe that wouldn't be fair either if you died, because they'll say, I should have died because I don't have kids. So hold it. Having PTSD is the only way to honor my friend. Sometimes people are afraid to give up their flashbacks because that's their memory of their friend. And so sometimes I'll say, do you have photographs, or do you know somebody else who has photographs? Do you have any other images that are not, like you're focusing so much on this person's death, you're forgetting their life and why you liked that person or why you cared about that person. I think we could honor that person better if we honored their life, not the way they died. I should have done more. If I enjoy my life, I'm a bad friend. And of course, that one's pretty easy to say, what would your friend want for you if the situation were reversed? Or if you were the one who died, you'd want him to suffer for the rest of his life? And they're usually going to say, well, no. Say, well, why would your friend want that for you? Can you live a good life for the two of you? It should have been me. I mean, those are thought logs, and you can keep that fire, that PTSD fire burning, and have a lot of shame and guilt and anger and all sorts of other emotions that are the manufactured emotions that are not. And sometimes that really gets in the way of them experiencing their natural grief. Sometimes the outcome of PTSD is not happy. Sometimes the outcome of PTSD is they don't have PTSD anymore, but they're sad. They're grieving. And that's a process that takes a while, doesn't it? But that's a normal process, and that is something that you can talk to them about. In the back of the book, we've got the myths of mourning, and you can have a session with them on talking about what's natural grief like, and have you ever grieved before, or you didn't let yourself grieve because why? So we've been focusing a lot more on grief, and very often what we find is it's kind of mediated by their depression. If we can't get to their depression, it's harder to deal with the grief stuff and get them back to their natural grief. So you need to choose the index traumatic event, and I'm going to show you a clip on that. And you also need to define what's a stuck point. And they have a handout on that. And you're going to work on explaining that we're going to work on getting your stuck points onto the log. And you can give them an example of a stuck point. Can somebody just shout out a stuck point that you heard in that first clip with Freddie? Huh?
Should have been me.
Should have been me. I'm a bad parent. I failed.
If I can't protect my children, then why, no one else?
Yeah, if I can't protect my children, nobody else can. Okay, so those are all stuck points, and they would go on his log if they show up on his impact statement. But I will remember, if they don't show up on his impact statement, to get them on his log anyway. So we will really introduce the log in session 2, but we're going to do the handout. Anticipating avoidance and increasing practice compliance. You want to anticipate they may have the desire to avoid. In fact, I sometimes will start the PTSD treatment on the phone before they ever come in. And you say, well, you made the phone call. Now you may feel worse and say, oh, I shouldn't have made that phone call. Or you may feel better and say, oh, I guess I don't need treatment after all. So if you predict both of those, then you're bound to be right on one of them. Come in anyway. So you really want to anticipate that they're going to want to avoid and not to come back to session 2 or whatever. And you want to also work on increasing their practice compliance. And then you got to give them an overview of what treatment's going to be like. And so here is where I'm going to show you a clip. In fact, I'm going to show you 2 clips. And people love watching these clips, so I assume